Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for taking the time to dial in this morning. My name is Rebecca Jennings. I'm Principal Client Advisor here at Global Reviews. And it's my role this morning to talk you through some of our recent research and insights on the UK and Irish, to a certain extent, energy market. For those of you who are perhaps not aware of who we are, just very quickly, Global Reviews have been working within the online optimization space for around 16, 17 years now across the UK, Europe and Australasia. We specialize in helping you understand the behavior of your potential consumers right from when they're first starting of thinking about changing or buying your product, the discover phase, how easy can customers find you online, how strong is your attraction to drawing them to consider your brand and to visit your website. Through the consider phase, how effectively do you engage with those potential customers, help them match a product or service to their specific needs. And then through to the act phase, how easy is it to actually purchase the product and service from you online. Those are the steps we're going to talk mostly about today. We also look at the receive and relate stages through post-login reviews, looking at how you service consumers online, but that's not the focus of what we're actually going to be talking about today, although it is something we do. We're going to be talking about some syndicated research that we perform on a regular basis in the UK, Australian, European, Irish markets around, I say specifically, energy and how consumers find energy brands when they're thinking of changing, thinking of swapping their electricity or gas, or they've bought a new property, how they find brands in this market, their loyalty to those brands, why they swap brands, what kind of research they do, but then also touching on what the sites can do to influence that process, how you can show consumers that you have a product that suits their needs. So as I say, we're going to be focusing on those first three steps today, looking at the research that we do, I say, on an ongoing basis in this market. So very quickly, I'm going to talk you through those two methodologies that cover those phases, and then we're going to look at some of the actual data. So there are two methodologies here that we run on a regular basis across these markets. The marketing effectiveness tool, the digital marketing effectiveness methodology, covering the discover and consider phases. Then the sales effectiveness research covers consider and act. The marketing effectiveness product, the DME, as I say, covers those discover and consider phases. So from the beginning, when consumers start to think about, I need to swap my energy, I'm coming up to the end of my contract, or I'm moving, and I'm looking about to swap my energy supplier. The DME is a methodology that we run on a very regular basis, up to monthly at the moment in the energy market in the UK. We recruit up to 2,500 in-market consumers a year. It's normally around 200 a month, and they are asked to do a number of things. They're in their own homes on their own technology. They download a little applet that tracks everything they do. So we can see where they go, how long it takes them to do the research, which clicks they make. When they go to search, we can see which terms they use and where they go as a result of those terms. So we can see everything they do as they go through this process. We ask them a range of pre-task questions, so setting the scene, who is your existing provider, who would you choose at this point if you had to choose a new provider, would you go with your existing provider, would you want to swap, and why. We then ask them to go and find a provider to suit their needs. So as I say, they go off, they're on their own technology, blank screen, we see where they go. Do they start at an aggregator, do they start at a brand, do they start at search? What do they do, where do they go, what search terms do they use, which brand sites do they use, and what kind of journeys do they take. We then ask them a range of questions about that process, including asking them to shortlist brands. So which brands at this point do they think they'd spend a little bit more time investigating, and why. And then we obviously ask them at this point which they think would be their preferred brand. They're effectively creating a funnel here from initial preference, initial recall, what did you actually do, where did you go, where did you visit, shortlist, and then finally through to a preferred brand. It's a system of passive management within their own homes, but it's real life behavior based on exactly what they do and also what they say about that process. So we can really understand the journey they go through when they're doing that research and what influences each step, and we can actually measure the sites they go to, the pages they click on, and say the search terms and how effective those are. So that's the start of that journey. How do they come up with brands? How do they make initial decisions? Then the DSE, the digital sales effectiveness piece, which we also saw there, is also a benchmark product that we run or use on a 6-monthly basis, because this is actually looking at your website and that of your competitors. It is a benchmark. When we run this, there's normally 8 to 10 brands in it. So users, again, are recruited. They're in their own homes on their own technology. They're in-market consumers. They're recruited to undertake a number of specific tasks. They're asked, for example, to go to the EDF website, go to the EON website, find the product range, find a specific product with a specific feature, get a quote for a specific postcode with specific requirements, and then go through the application process as far as they can, obviously not actually swapping their own energy at this point, but asked to go through with dummy details or as far as they can. So they go through a series of steps on the website, from initial engagement. Would they even go any further after the home page? Does it look as if the product that suits their needs? Then what have you got? Do you have something that suits my needs specifically, not just let's look at the whole product range, but what my needs specifically? Could you meet them? Why would I choose you? Facilitating decisions. So how do I reach out to you? How do I ask a question? Would you be there if I had a problem? Why choose you specifically? What's different about you as a brand? And how would I go and do this application? And then finally, the application form itself, going through the form, what do they think about it and how successful are they? The benchmark actually takes into account a lot of details from that journey, from those consumers. We track exactly what they do. Again, through the applet, we can see exactly where they go, their click streams, the heat maps. We ask them some questions about their interaction pre and post the journey. So what did they think of the brand? Would they come back? What the key problems they found? We ask them some questions about the features and functions that they engage with. So they do a customer audit. So there's a whole bunch of data that comes from the customer themselves. Also, there is a significant amount of data, around 350 criteria, that come from a best practice audit that we ourselves internally conduct. As I say, it's about 350 yes-no questions across that journey again. So looking at best practice, and does the site meet best practice at each step? Very discrete questions across that journey. So across the journey, from initial engagement all the way through to the end of the application form, we have data both from users, what do they do, what do they think about it, and then this independent best practice audit combined the two to give you a score across the journey for yourselves, but also for all the competitors in your market. So it's a benchmark. So those are two pieces of research that we conduct on a regular basis in the UK, Irish, and other markets. So what we're going to look about today is some of the recent data, particularly from the DME, about how consumers are making decisions, what influences those decisions, and what you can, as brands, start to play with, and what's already happening in that market in terms of how consumers are making decisions, swapping, who are they swapping to, and why. So we're going to come back again to the start of that journey, the start of that sort of process we saw earlier, discover, consider, act phase. And we're going to start with this DME, the digital marketing effectiveness piece, which I mentioned earlier, the 200 consumers every month being put through this funnel, if you like, where we measure, to start with, who they recall unprompted. We also measure initial preferences, so who would you prefer at this point, without having done any research? Would you prefer the brand that already provides your energy? Who do they go and visit? And then in the course of that study, which sites? And not just brand sites, obviously aggregators, Google, search, different types of search sites, where do they go? Who would shortlist you? So at this point, they've done some research. Who would they then actually put on a shortlist to investigate further? There's normally maybe 3 brands on that for most consumers who delve a little bit deeper. And then finally, after having done that research, who would they actually choose to interact with? Who would they choose to take energy out with at this point? So this is the kind of data we're getting for brands in this market. It's actually for Bourgoche in the Irish market, and this is something we can replicate for all the brands in the market. We can look at that unprompted recall, so how many people know you at the beginning of the process, unprompted. We can look at who visits the site, so we can see here for Bourgoche, Bourgoche is a round dot, something in the region about a 45% unprompted recall, as we can see there. 16% of the consumers in this study visited them, which puts them somewhere in the middle. The most visited site was actually Electric Island, with around 25% of consumers visiting them. Then who puts them on the shortlist? 33% of our consumers put Bourgoche on their shortlist, and again that puts them somewhere in the middle. The actual highest we get is SSE Atricity in the Irish market, who are being shortlisted by about 48% of our consumers, despite the fact they had a slightly a very similar visit rate. They're actually being shortlisted by a higher percentage of consumers. So you're immediately starting to see, okay, well, how is that happening? The first thing you would want to know is, well, what is SSE Atricity doing? That means they're being put onto more shortlists, even though fewer consumers are visiting them. And then finally, we can see the preference at the end of that journey, what percentage of consumers finally preferred that brand for Bourgoche. We can see it's 12%. The highest actually in this market for this wave of data towards the end of last year was actually Energia. So again, we've got an interesting dynamic there. We've got Energia coming in with low initial brand recall, relatively good visits, again around the same as we just seen from Bourgoche SSE Atricity, and actually ending up with a preferred rate of about 27%, even though they've come in with a lower initial recall and actually a lower visit. So very much interesting to see there what's going on, why they've been shortlisted. I would imagine, again, that's something to do with maybe the search results are coming up well on the search results in terms of having an interesting product, prompting people to shortlist them and then to finally prefer them. So we can see here with the DME, this is kind of the data we're going to be getting out of the research. But let's take, again, a little step back here and actually start drilling into some of the specific data for the UK market and seeing how consumers are moving across these steps here and what's influencing their decisions. Having looked at some of the research we've been running on a monthly basis for the last 18 months or so, it's very interesting to see when you start comparing the industries across different geographies and then delving into why some of these things are different. It's we've lost a graph, unfortunately. It's very obvious when we actually look at apologies, this graph is not showing up, so we'll do it this way. I'll show you this one because I really want to show you this one. So the first thing I wanted to see when we start delving into the differences between these markets and why things are different is when you actually look at the DME for the Irish, the UK and the Australian market, you can see there's actually something really interesting going on in the UK market in terms of loyalty. I said at the beginning we asked consumers who would their initial preference be before they did any research. We've got a situation here where 44%, for example, of the Irish market here would choose their incumbent, and 47% actually of the Australian market would say, actually at this point, before I do any research, I'm pretty happy with my incumbent, I'd stay with them. If you look at the UK market, this is actually for the last 6 months, 14% would say they'd stick with their preferred incumbent, so much smaller percentage willing or thinking they'd just stay where they were. 30% at this point already had another preference of saying, actually, I've already got an idea in mind of who my other brand might be. And actually 55%, so over half, are saying, well, actually, at this point, I don't know who I'll go with. I don't have any initial preference. I don't particularly have any loyalty to the brand that's already providing me my energy. I'm very happy to think about going with somebody else. So that initially sets up, right from the beginning, the fact that the market here is different, the market in the UK is different, and what is going on in terms of how people are making decisions about their energy providers here from a starting point of essential disloyalty or lack of loyalty to any particular provider. They start the journey thinking, actually, I probably will change providers. I'm not particularly wedded to the provider I already have. I would go out there and look for something else. So that's where everybody comes from the beginning. And then we get to a stage, then when we actually look at the DSE, the two things work obviously very closely together. It's interesting, again, feeding into that is the fact that there are no brands in the market at the moment demonstrating that they can meet users' needs particularly well. And that is what this evaluating options piece that I've highlighted here talks about. I talked about earlier about the steps that consumers go through. We ask them to go through go through a website, a different set of consumers for each site. We ask them to go through each site and go, well, right from the web page, initial engagement, through to the application form. The evaluation option stage is where we ask them to find specific products with specific elements to demonstrate that the site shows that the products can meet specific needs, rather than just saying, this is product A, this is product B, it's up to you to choose between them, or in many cases, this is product A to Z and choose between them. There are a number of options. This is actually saying, will actually help the consumer understand which of these suits their needs specifically for their size of house, their energy consumption, their needs. Do they want green energy? Do they want renewable energy? Do they just simply want the longest term, low price fix? How can you show them that you have a product that really suits that needs? And actually, our research shows that brands in the market at the moment do this very badly. This is this evaluation options piece where we've got an average score of 42%. Obviously, this is percentages out of 100. I don't think we've ever had anybody get 100 realistically, but certainly we have other markets in which people are scoring 65, 70 here. It's certainly not impossible. Things like credit card markets where they've got lots of options tend to do better at this. So average of 42% across all the brands that we reviewed, and they say there were about 8 to 10 brands in this. This is the UK market. There are another 5 or 6 in the Irish market, and then probably another 10 in the Australian market that is done on a regular basis. So an average of 42%, so very poor. And even when you look at the top performers, it's not the case that there is somebody who's really blowing this out of the water at the minute. We've got E.ON doing an okay job here at 51%, which is okay. We'd normally say a score of about 54, 55% was where you really wanted to be doing an okay job. So it's still below, I would say that, but it's certainly distinctly above average. But there's a lot of upscale room there. Obviously, you've got 51%. It's certainly not impossible to be getting 70% at this stage. So we've got a market in which people are disloyal, in which people are saying, well, I'm ready just to go out there and see what there is out there. But actually, the DSE appears to be showing that actually brands are very bad at the moment at showing consumers, and they can really meet their needs particularly well. So consumers are trying to do this research, but actually the brands are not supporting what they're trying to do, and are not particularly engaging with consumers to say, okay, we know you're open to changing, we know you're open to swapping, this is why you would swap to us, because we can really meet your needs. It's very product-led rather than needs-led. And we'll see a little bit more of that in a moment. And so leading back to that point again, how many of your existing customers would choose you again? So back to that, sort of slightly back to that point of the whole market being disloyal, and we're looking at specific brands here. We've got 41% of British Gas consumers saying, yeah, I probably would. 30% of EDF, 15% of E.ON, existing customers saying at this point they would choose them again. And you contrast that again to the Irish market where percentages are much higher. So we've got a specific issue in the UK market where consumers are disloyal. Consumers are very much looking for a new provider, and we'll see what they're looking for in a moment. And largely speaking, even the bigger brands getting lower loyalty rates than they're establishing in markets like Ireland and indeed in Australia. Part of this obviously is due to the intense fragmentation of the UK market. This plays a big role in there are a lot of options that consumers can go with, in terms of who can provide their energy. Some of those will be rebrands of other providers. So Sainsbury's, for example, is not creating their own energy. They are obviously repackaging. M&S similarly, but they are the brands that consumers think about in this market. So that is one element around this. There is a significant amount of fragmentation, but still, when we sort of look about the journey consumers take, there are definite things that brands can do to capture consumers' attention more in terms of why would you choose us specifically in a very competitive market. So we've got a fragmentation of the UK market. Nobody in the last 3 to 4 waves of the DME was capturing more than around 13% of the market in the UK. That's British Gas, obviously one of the biggest names, incumbents here, whereas we're looking at bigger market shares in the Irish market, Energia, Electric Ireland, over 20%, SSE Electricity, 20% themselves. So getting a higher proportion of the market there. Interestingly, in the UK, we are seeing it is entirely possible to break into that top layer of established providers. You've got OVO, and we're going to see a little bit more in a minute about how OVO are taking that 11% of the market and what consumers are thinking about and seeing when they're making that decision. But you've got a very fragmented market. But as I say, what we're seeing is we are seeing it is possible for the smaller brands, slightly different brands, OVO, First Utility in there you see with 7%, starting to winnow away at the bigger brands. And how are they doing that? So what is driving that final preference in the DME when consumers are picking a brand at the end of the funnel? What are they driven by? Well, they're driven by price, unsurprisingly. Consumers are saying, when we ask them why did they pick the final brand they picked, 45% to 41% are saying it's because of the cheapest price. Interesting, in the Irish market, more consumers are saying they had the best plan for my needs. And this goes back to that data we saw a minute ago from the DSE, showing that actually in the UK market, brands are doing a very poor job of showing consumers that they have brands that specifically meet their needs. So consumers are not finding that kind of information when they are doing this research online. They are looking for deals, they're looking for prices, but actually the sites are not doing a particularly good job in the UK market of demonstrating that they have a brand, a product that suits their needs specifically, rather than just simply looking at the headlines. Obviously, the other elements are fairly similar. Trust this company, I've used this before, but also this idea that plans are easy to understand. But it is very price-driven, it is very deal-driven. But at the moment, the UK brands are simply not doing a good enough job in their websites to show consumers that they have products that meet their specific needs. And that's important because what's actually happening here as consumers do their research journey is that they're getting information from a lot of other places. So they are getting information from, certainly in the UK market, a lot of comparison sites. Comparison sites actually dominate visits from search engines. Most people go to search in the process, and we'll see a slide in a moment that sort of shows you where people go. But the vast majority of people at some point use a search engine. We all do. It's a natural process, and we're doing this kind of thing. That's not surprising. But if we look at the most used search terms, the top 4 really are brands, so British Gas, E.ON, EDF, npower. Unsurprisingly, you then have U-Switch as actually a search term, and then you've got a couple of other market terms. But actually, the most visited domain from search is U-Switch. So what's happening, and we can delve into a lot more depth about this, I'm not going to do that this morning, that's not really what we're going to do, but we can look a lot more depth about, so people who search for E.ON, where did they go? Did they go to E.ON? Did they go to U-Switch? Did they go to British Gas? People, those 16% who search for British Gas, did they all go to British Gas, or did they get diverted into U-Switch and Money Supermarket? Because obviously that's a lot of what's going on here. 37% of visits from search are to U-Switch. despite the fact they only had 6% of the search terms. So clearly, people are searching for other things, mostly brands, but actually ending up at USwitch, even though they started off thinking they were going to a brand. So there's a diversion in the market immediately where people start going off to these comparison sites, but also obviously you've got Money Supermarket in there as well. So they're capturing a lot of interest at this point with obviously good SEO, PPC, high up there on the adverts, on the search results, but also you've got to look at the messages that they're communicating, the messages they're giving consumers when you actually do that search. They're obviously capturing consumers' attention and interest with that kind of search result, perhaps more so than the brands are. So simple ways to compare, things like that, popular comparison websites. So you've got to start with here what's going on. Why are we losing consumers even at this point to USwitch? And actually what happens, interestingly enough, for this sort of piece of research, around a third, just over a third of UK research in this process only visited aggregators. In a real life situation where they were spending longer, perhaps over a week, say, doing the research, they would probably end up coming back to the brand websites as well, and we see that even in this research. But certainly when people are making decisions perhaps about which brands suddenly go on their shortlist, a considerable amount of them are only going to aggregators. So there's that. Again, the information, the power they're getting from those sites is very important when they're going on to make their decisions. Around a fifth only go to a brand website. So they do the research and they go to brands and they make a decision from there. And then we have a considerable minority of people who are bouncing around backwards and forwards. So search to aggregator to brand, search to brand to aggregator. And when we actually talk to consumers about how they would do this in a real life, as I say, that will happen. More people will go from search engines to aggregators, they'll make a short list, and then perhaps when they've got a bit more time, they'll go and have a little look at those specific brand websites. Because most people actually want to apply and complete their application through the brand website, not through the aggregator. They think that is the most trustworthy way to do it, and they think that's most likely to get them the right deal. So that comes in the longer term. But certainly consumers are making decisions at this stage. They're winnowing out, certainly through to the shortlist, based on aggregator information they're seeing in that search. So it's really important at this point to start thinking about what are your messages, and are you communicating right from the beginning that you can meet consumers' needs right from that SEO and PPC. I said earlier we were talking a little bit about how decisions get made here and how we're seeing the rise of brands like OVO and what's going on here. How are they managing in this market, which is incredibly fragmented and it's incredibly disloyal? How are they managing to get over 10% of consumer preferences? Having started with a much smaller amount of initial preference. It's not the case that people are coming in already going, oh, I've seen some great adverts for them, I've seen the telly adverts, I've seen the print, they are the one for me. No, initial preference is only 3%. It's pretty small. Definitely lagging, say, the 12% we have for British Gas, for example. But actually, OVO are doing something in that process of showing consumers who they are and what they've got. They're taking that 3% and turning it into an 11% final preference. So clearly, they are doing something that a lot of other brands are not so good at in terms of convincing consumers that they have a product that suits their needs. So why are consumers picking OVO versus why perhaps are they picking British Gas, which obviously still at 13%, still getting the highest percentage here. So why are they picking OVO? Well, it's obviously, as all these things, it's a mixture of things, but I think it's very clear to see what's going on between these two brands in this particular slide. So this is, we've gone to the consumers who's picked each of these brands and said, well, why did you choose this particular brand? Very clear within the British Gas set of consumers, it's about almost a legacy knowledge of the brand. I trust them, I've used them before, I've come to the conclusion that they're okay. Only 28% are saying they had the cheapest price or good fees or plans easy to understand, even smaller. So that's been influenced on a sort of a quarter of consumers, but actually most consumers are saying, well, it's basically a legacy. I know them, I trust them. Everybody's much in this market. I'm not convinced that anybody else was going to do a better job. So almost sort of resting on the laurels, if you like. People are not choosing them because they think they've actually got a great deal. Most of the time they're choosing them because they're a best of a bad bunch. When you think about why people chose OVO, completely different. That is very much driven around price, but also around good options, plans easy to understand. They could look at the website and go, well, actually, I understand that plan. It makes sense. This is what I want. This is the one that suits my needs. The website was visually appealing. Recommendations. Somebody else said to me, go look at the website, go and look at this product. And I have taken that on board, and I've gone and I've looked, and I've made a decision these are the right people for me. So much less likely to be influenced by previous experience here, much more likely to be the initial experience they're having on the OVO's website that convinces them they not only have the cheapest deal, but they are good deals, their plans are easy to understand, the website is easy to use. They are very satisfied with that experience. And that goes through, again, when we look at who essentially these people who chose OVO are, and look at some of their voice of customer. Because again, that's something both DME and DSE do. It isn't just ticking boxes. We actually get consumers' voice of customer about why they did what they did. So who are OVO stealing these customers from, essentially? So that 11% at the end who chose OVO, who are they existing customers of? Who are they stealing? Who are they converting? And as you can see from the bar chart, just 20% of them are existing OVO customers who are obviously loyalists. 80% of them are currently customers of another brand. So OVO is managing to change the minds of 80% of these consumers. Not one brand overly dominant here. Mixture of brands. They're stealing consumers from EDF, Scottish Power, Gas, British Gas, E.ON, Npower, and a whole bunch of other small providers here. So everybody is leaking to OVO. And it's really interesting when you look at some of the actual, say, voice of customers coming out here. We're seeing them just ticking the boxes that the deals were good, that they could look at, say, the website was showing them that they could find the plans were easy to understand, the site was visually appealing. But also a lot of the voice of customer is about, they mention good customer service on the website, the recommendation from which, they impressed me with their awards, good reviews. So it isn't just price, price, price. People say at the beginning of the process, oh, I'm just driven by price. But actually, when you look at what really influences their decisions, that is obviously a key driver. But it's all this other, perhaps what you might call constant drip feed of value as to why you would choose me. Why is this deal best for you specifically? Why would you choose OVO above and beyond that as well? Because fundamentally, they're probably finding 3 or 4 brands that have a very similar price, very similar offer. It's really difficult to differentiate between them. We saw it at the beginning. There's not a lot of loyalty in the market. Mostly consumers are saying, well, I don't really know who to go with because the existing provider is okay. I don't feel any particular loyalty to anybody. So actually, I'll be driven by price. But then it isn't just price because, as I say, they've probably found 3 or 4 brands that are offering them very similar price. What's making them, pushing them over the line? It's this kind of stuff. It's why choose us. It's a good service. It's the plans being easy to understand and laid out on the web page. And that's very much what the DSE was showing, where actually a lot of brands don't do this particularly well. We're starting, say, to get some experience and some examples of where people are doing it, but actually, generally speaking, this is the bit of the journey that most brands don't do very well. And you can see the difference on how people are approaching it simply from this sort of statistic. So of those who visited the OVO website, 50% picked the brand as their final choice. Of those who visited the British Gas website, just 26% did. Really big difference in how those websites are influencing consumers' decisions at this point. And realistically, looking at the DME, people aren't spending a lot of time on the website. In the DSE, we ask them to go through the entire journey and we evaluate the entire journey. At this point, when the DME, people are just looking. They're essentially just looking around. Does it look if it suits my needs? I've had a quick look. Yeah, it looks great. So it's very much about the first experiences consumers are having here on the first 2 or 3 pages that are convincing consumers considerably more that OVO is the way to go. And that is for a variety of things that we saw earlier. It is about products and prices, but it is about this constant drip feed of value about why you would choose us over the other brands in the market. Being really easy to understand quickly what the products are. So, for example, here you've got OVO framing products in terms of needs. So renewable electricity, making that very clear, and then very clear, again, fixed price, exit fees, this is how much you would save. They're laid out side by side. It's really easy for a consumer to scan both of these and see what the differences are without spending a lot of time trying to read a lot of small print. They would obviously, so this is the sort of first estimated quote. We're very much talking about the first experiences consumers are having here in the DME. They're not spending hours and hours getting a very detailed quote at this point. They're going, well, actually, yeah, this looks like it suits me. They're really grabbing consumers and getting them, encouraging them to come back and spend more time finding out. You've also got a lot of external validation and service support here. It's got this is the Which supplier, for UK's first Which recommended provider. You've got the focus on the support that you've got as well. So you've got free phone, mobile numbers, and making the point that it's contact with a human touch. So if you've got any issues, we'll be here, easy for you to talk to. So those little things that we saw earlier really making that little difference. On their own, they're quite small, but actually when you add them up, compared to when you add them up and sort of combine them with the good deals and the good pricing, they're really making a big difference. And then when you perhaps contrast that with something like the British Gas equivalent, where you've got requiring a compulsory phone number in order just to simply get that quote. You can't even get to the indicative quote without actually giving them a phone number, and that is going to involve an awful lot of people dropping out, because it's essentially explicitly saying we're going to call you and talk to you about this. And a lot of people at this point are going, well, actually, no, I just want to get an idea whether you're interested or not. So a lot of people saying, actually, I'm not going to even do this. And when you actually go through that process, if you actually do decide to give the phone number, the quote is much harder to scan and compare. You've got lots of products here, a lot of small print. They go down the page, and in order to compare them, you can have up and down, up and down. You've got little numbers which aren't going to mean a lot to people. So price reduced by 5.1%. That doesn't really mean a lot of difference now if I'm swapping, and what's that actually difference to me. You've got products here which are exactly the same price, and what's the difference between them. So again, as a consumer, you're looking at, well, I don't understand the difference here. They're all the same. So at this point, where consumers are trying to do a quick bit of research to understand whether these things suit their needs, there are a lot more little roadblocks, little pain points put in their way by British Gas, leading to a situation we saw, say, a moment ago, where 50% of those who visit the OVO site would choose them, and just 25% of those who visit, or 26% of those who visit the British Gas site would choose them. So we're seeing a market in which, as I say, there's very little loyalty. People are very happy to swap. They go into this research thinking they're just looking for prices, but actually when you get through the research and understand why they're making the decisions they're making, why they're swapping, when you actually drill into it, it's very important, the influence of products to suit my needs. Why would I go with you as a brand specifically when 3 or 4 of you are offering actually the same price? So I'm driven by price to start with, but actually my final decision is going to be driven by a lot of other little drip feeds of value, which actually an awful lot of the brands in the UK market are very poor at doing right now. So there is an opportunity. There's an opportunity here for brands to essentially take the lead on this and start saying, well, actually, I understand that you are comparing us to other people, and we need to help you do that explicitly and implicitly. We need to help you compare our own products really easily and simply, and understand which of those really suits your needs when we think about not just pure low price, but the other features and functions that you might be valuing. And that is really the opportunity in the market, the DME and the DSE clearly showing that certainly in the UK market, this is not being done particularly well right now. So essentially, I've just summarised this. are energy consumers in the UK market very open to switching, very happy to contemplate it, and low prices do grab their attention, but that's not the end of the story. The site then needs to very quickly demonstrate products that can meet user needs, as well as supporting the why you. And as I say, quickly, so these need to be done on the home page and the first couple of pages after the home page. People will then spend a bit more time if they've got that conviction, but it needs to quickly and easily, all the way from the SEO and the PPC, quite frankly, the messages need to demonstrate not just low prices, but why the product suits your needs specifically and why me as a brand. Because we're definitely seeing a market in which lesser known brands can grab market share and steal those consumers from all those bigger brands by demonstrating an understanding of how users want to quickly and easily understand the brand's value and compare options. And they will switch. These consumers are very happy to switch energy providers given the right motivation. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. I've talked quite quickly for about 45 minutes. If you have any questions, very happy to take them, or very happy for you to email me on rebecca.jennings@globalreviews.com, because obviously what you've seen here was a very high-level snapshot of the kind of research we have across DME, DSE, and indeed mobile, versus what we actually have for subscribing clients, which includes, as I say, monthly basis research for the DME, 6 monthly basis for the DSE. In fact, the energy DSE is coming up again to be run in May, so very soon. So we're going to do that again in about a month's time. Online portal access for all of this data. It doesn't just come in a spreadsheet or a PowerPoint. You have online portal access for all the data that you have, including historical data. But you also get inside activation workshops where somebody would come along, myself, and actually deliver a very bespoke presentation about what was the pain in your journey, how could you improve the journey for consumers, and what are your competitors doing. It's very much a competitor benchmarking exercise. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. The webinar will be available as a recording for anybody in the organisation who didn't make it this morning. Very happy to disseminate that. It'll be available on our website and our YouTube channel. And as I say, if I have any questions, please do email me on rebecca.jennings@globalreviews.com. So thank you very much for your attention this morning. It's good to talk to you. And I'm sure there will be other webinars coming up on a regular basis, so please do look out for those. Thank you very much.